All right. Good evening, everyone out there who's tuning in live for the Leitner Observatory Public Night live stream. Let me turn on my camera here so so you can see me. There we go. Hi, I'm Michael Faison. I'm the director of the Leitner Observatory EL, and it's mostly cloudy, partly cloudy, half cloudy, clear tonight. Although I did see the crescent moon when I was out a little bit earlier. Supposed to clear up a little bit later tonight, so if it does, I'm going to set up the telescope and do some observing, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So it's been a while since I've been able to do the live stream. I think last time I was on YouTube for the Tuesday night public night was back in November. I think it was right after the Halloween supermoon, blue moon. So it's been a little while. Took a break for winter solstice. And then started up again with the start of the semester, but the weather's been pretty terrible. So the last couple of Tuesdays, it's been a little icy and hard to get into the observatory and get set up to use the observatory. But nice day today, warm weather today here in New Haven. There's still a lot of snow out there, although it looks like most of the ice on the observing deck has melted. So you can see behind me here the view from our observing deck camera, looking out at the observing deck and Farnham Gardens and Edward Street. A little bit of snow over there in the far corner. There's actually, you can see it a little bit behind me here. There's a table and chairs where I was working with a sundial earlier today for a class. So that's why that's out there. But still lots of snow out in Farnham Gardens though, sort of crusty snow. During the height of the snow last Tuesday and the Tuesday before, there were quite a lot of large snowmen that appeared in the out in the Farnham Gardens. So someone made good use of all the snow. I went out and made a snow person in my backyard with my 2-year-old, and it melted a couple days later. So. Okay, so I'm not planning on setting up telescopes tonight for observing, but I thought I would talk a little bit about what's up in the sky this week. So if we get a clear night, I think it's supposed to be clear tomorrow night, in fact. Tomorrow's supposed to be a nice day. You can go out and look for some of these new constellations, spring constellations, and naked eye planets, and a beautiful crescent moon, right? So last Friday was the start of the Lunar New Year, which always starts with a new moon, usually mid-January to mid-February. And Mars is up, although it's faded quite a lot compared to when it was at opposition last October. So you can certainly find it and still see it and look at it through a telescope. But I think it's about 3 times further away now than it was last October. So it's 3 squared, 9 times brighter, and it looks 3 times smaller through the telescope. So still neat to look at, but it's not as spectacular as it was last October when it was close to us. And of course, the Mars Perseverance rover will be landing on Mars, hopefully, on Thursday. So historic mission. Definitely tune into nasa.tv on Thursday to watch or get the news about the Perseverance lander. Of course, Mars is so far away that it takes roughly 10 minutes or so, a little more than that, more like 12 minutes or so for the light to get to us from Mars. So the lander has to do all of its complicated parachutes and sky crane and sky platform and landing and orienting and initialization autonomously, and then we get the news about it. So again, thanks to everyone for tuning into the chat. Looks like a few people are tuned in or watching the stream live. If anyone has any questions for me about astronomy, what's up in the sky, about astronomy news, there's been quite a bit of news since last November, or anything going on at the Leitner Observatory, happy to answer questions. Just type them in the chat and I'll try and keep an eye on that. So first, let me just show you what's up in the sky this week. And so I'm going to switch to the sky calendar, and then I'm going to switch to my planetarium simulator, Stellarium. So let me switch over. Okay. So I've talked about this before. This is skymaps.com. This organization does a really nice 2-page sky map and sky calendar every month. So skymaps.com, you can go get the latest version. And it's nice because it shows you not only what constellations are up in the sky for that month from, let's see, latitude, sort of mid-northern latitude. It'll also show you where the planets are. So that's, of course, different every month. So that's convenient. As I mentioned, you can see Mars. Let's see. You can see Mars right here in the constellation of Taurus. So not very bright, but you can definitely find it. You can see the Milky Way going across the sky from southeast to northwest now. Last fall, we were seeing it going across this part of the sky over here. And I will actually talk about some of these individual constellations in a minute in the Sky Simulator. But I am seeing my favorite winter constellations like Orion and Sirius and Gemini, and starting to see the constellations that were up when I started doing these live streams on YouTube almost a year ago, right? When did I do the first one of these? Sometime in April, I think. And we were looking at Gemini and Cancer and Leo from my backyard. So here we are. I wanted to point out the calendar here on the far left, which will tell you when the moon phases are and when the moon is close to particular asterisms or particular planets, any interesting conjunctions like that. Nothing, when I looked at this earlier, I didn't see anything outstanding. Of course, the new moon was on February 11th, last Thursday, and so that's why the Lunar New Year started on Friday. And then, of course, today is Mardi Gras, which is indirectly connected to the moon phases because, let's see, Lent is 40 days, and where Easter happens is determined by when the moon is full. So Easter gets determined by astronomy because you have the spring equinox on March 21st. Then you have the next full moon is the so-called Paschal moon. And then the next Sunday is Easter Sunday. So Easter is designed historically to fall close to Passover, right? So I can talk more about that if anyone has any questions. It's complicated to actually figure out when the date of Easter will be at some point in the future. And medieval and Renaissance astronomers came up with complicated rules to predict, the cycle of 19 years when Easter comes back to being on the same date in the calendar. Anyway, so moon near Mars, moon near the Pleiades, first quarter moon on the 19th, right? So that's Friday again, about a week per major cycle of the moon. It's always interesting when the moon is near Pleiades. So the Pleiades is that little cluster in Taurus, right? The Seven Sisters cluster, which at sunset is almost overhead, right? Look overhead, you see the bright stars in the winter hexagon and the face of Taurus, the bull, and then the baby dipper, the teeny tiny dipper. People call it because it looks vaguely dipper-shaped. The Little Dipper is actually an asterism up here in the Little Bear near Polaris, the North Star. But I can see why people think the Pleiades is a little teeny tiny baby dipper. And then the moon passes near Cancer, and I think it actually gets fairly close to the Beehive cluster this month. So that's going to be on the 25th of February. The calendar is also mentioning the zodiacal light, which is an interesting phenomenon. I saw a picture of this just the other day, and I was thinking about it. The zodiacal light is reflected sunlight from very tiny particles in the plane of the solar system. So you can see the zodiacal light as this faint glow, very similar to the Milky Way, in the plane of the solar system, which astronomers call the ecliptic. So you can see this dashed line going across the sky is the ecliptic. And we always see the sun and the moon and the naked eye planets close to that dotted line. So the constellations that are along that dotted line are important, right? So Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, right? Those are the zodiac constellations which we use to keep track of the positions of the planets. So in March and April is the best time to look for the zodiacal light. What you would see is sort of a shaft of faint light coming up out of the horizon just after sunset, really just after twilight. The sky has to be dark enough that you can see that faint reflected light. So I'm pretty sure I've seen it a couple of times when I lived out in the Southwest in New Mexico, but it's pretty subtle, and you certainly can't see it in New Haven. But if you happen to be going someplace with really dark skies, March and April, you can potentially see it just after the end of twilight in the west sky, coming straight out of the western sky, a beam of light. If you're someplace where the sky is dark, it looks like it shouldn't be there. It looks like, oh, there's a city over there or something, and it should actually be dark over there. Let me switch over to my sky simulator and point out a few interesting objects that you can see with the naked eye, and maybe if you have a pair of binoculars, some things you can potentially see with binoculars. So I'm going to switch to my sky simulator here. Okay. So let me set up the sky for right now. So here I am at 7:12. All right, hopefully that's going to come through. Yeah, okay, that looks good. So it's 7:13 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so we have that crescent moon over here in the west-southwest. So very bright, easy to find if the sky's clear, and very beautiful. I love seeing the crescent moon. It's one of my favorite things to look at through my small telescope or through binoculars. And then up along the plane of the ecliptic. So I was talking about that line that represents the plane of the solar system. So I've drawn it in here in orange across the sky, ecliptic. Up along that path is the planet Mars, which is, as I said, is not as impressive as it was back in October, but you can definitely see it. You'll clearly see it. And if you zoom in on it with a telescope, which we could potentially do one of these Tuesday nights if it's clear, right? So if you zoom in on it with a telescope, it's going to look a factor of 3 smaller than it did back in October. You know, the magic of a planetarium simulation program. I can go back in time here to October. So there's November and there's October. There's what it looked like when it was close to opposition and everyone was really excited about it back in October. But if we go back to today, there's there's what it looks like today. So much fainter and smaller, but still pretty cool. And of course, I think it's interesting if you have the chance to look at Mars through a telescope on Thursday or Friday when the Perseverance lander is going to be landing there. So let me point out the interesting constellations and things you might be able to see with binoculars or a small telescope if you happen to have one. So the crescent moon I mentioned, Mars I mentioned, and then right next to Mars is that Pleiades star cluster. So the Pleiades is not really, by the way, there's a satellite going by right there. What is that? Meteor M2. I think that's a rocket booster. Anyway, there it goes. Or actually, no, I think that's a weather satellite. Anyway, so there's the Seven Sisters, the Pleiades star cluster, Subaru in Japanese. And you can see roughly 4 or 5 stars from the light pollution that we have here in New Haven. If you go someplace where the sky is really dark and if you have really good visual acuity, you can see more stars. This is a nice object to see through binoculars and a really nice object to try to photograph. So if you have an SLR camera, mine's over there. If you have an SLR camera or a DSLR camera, set it up on a tripod, snap a couple of 1-second exposures in the direction of the Pleiades. And then later on, you can combine the images using Photoshop or some software. I need to make a video about how to do that, because I've been talking about doing that. And you can get some really nice, quick images. One of the quickest, besides the moon, one of the quickest things to get started in astrophotography, taking pictures of with a DSLR camera. I'll zoom back out, and I'm going to turn on the constellation lines and labels so you can see where they are. So Aries is not a very bright zodiac constellation. It's sort of these 3 stars right here, which is supposed to be a ram, like so. Taurus, though, is easy to find. Taurus is a constellation, kind of looks like what it's supposed to look like, and it's got some nice bright stars like Aldebaran. Aldebaran is a red giant star fairly close to us, about 60 light years away. Yeah, I've got the distance labeled up here, so 66.6 light years away. And so it's quite bright, quite a bit bigger than the sun, more luminous than the sun. It's a star towards the end of its lifespan, so it's going to turn into a planetary nebula sometime in the next few tens or hundreds of millions of years. And then you can see the face of Taurus the Bull right here. There's the classical illustration. And then the Pleiades over here to the right sort of makes up the body of Taurus the Bull. And then Taurus is facing Orion. Orion is easy to find in the winter sky. The 3 belt stars are quite bright. And then the bright red star Betelgeuse up here at his shoulder is easy to find. And then his foot Rigel down to the right. If you actually use the 3 stars in the belt of Orion, you can go down to the left and find the brightest star in the sky, which is the bright star Sirius. So actually, if it were clear outside tonight, I would expect to be able to see Sirius in my observing deck camera here. It's a little bit hazy in this camera. I don't see Sirius poking through the clouds yet, but maybe a little bit later on tonight. If you find Sirius, Sirius is the dog star, the brightest star in Canis Major, the big dog. If you find Sirius, then you can make a ring of bright stars around Orion. So if you go up to the left from Sirius, you can see Procyon, the bright star in Canis Minor, the little dog. And then if you go up from Procyon, you can see Pollux, the brighter of the 2 stars in Gemini, the twins. Right next to it is Castor, right? So Pollux and Castor are the twins. Keep going up and to the right, and you come to Capella, the goat star. I was actually talking about this constellation in one of my classes earlier today. Auriga is this pattern right here. And it's an old constellation. What do you think it's supposed to be? A pentagon? The home plate and a baseball diamond? Yeah, if I turn on the classical illustration here, you can see, okay, it's a shepherd, I guess, holding a goat and some baby goats. So Auriga is, in classical Greek mythology, the charioteer. So the charioteer. Now, it's part of an earlier constellation, and you can tell that because of the goats. Capella actually is Latin for she-goat, mama goat, if you like. And I've always loved that these 3 stars right here that make up this little triangle right next to Capella are called the kids. So we've got Capella and the kids. And then later on, the constellation was associated with a Greek myth of, who was it? Erichthonius, I think, who supposedly invented the chariot. So when you look at the classical illustration of Auriga, it's like this guy who's driving a chariot. You can see his whip right here. He's driving a chariot, and someone's handed him a family of goats that he has to carry around in his chariot because of the burden of history, I suppose. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. I'm getting sidetracked. If we go down from Capella, you can find the bright red star Aldebaran, which is the face of Taurus the Bull. And then you can come down and to the left back to Rigel. So you end up making this kind of hexagon shape in the sky right around the ecliptic. And astronomers call that the winter hexagon. So in the summer, we see the summer triangle, Deneb, Altair, and Vega. And in the winter, we see the winter hexagon. So you should be able to see those stars any clear night this week. Let's see. The Big Dipper is not really out tonight. The Big Dipper is kind of low in the northeast. The Big Dipper is really best seen in late spring, early summer. If you stay up late enough, right? If we were to go later in the evening to about 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, the Big Dipper is starting to get up higher in the sky. Of course, the Big Dipper is part of the Big Bear, right? Ursa Major right here. So these 7 stars that make up the Dipper asterism are very bright, and you can easily see them even in the light pollution of New Haven. And then famously, the 2 stars at the end of the cup point to Polaris, the North Star. So that can help you find the Little Dipper as well. Most of the stars in the Little Dipper are faint and hard to see in a city. But you can usually see the star Polaris, quite a bright star, not the brightest star in the sky. That's a common misconception. It's an important star because it's always due north. But Sirius, the dog star, is the brightest star in the sky. Polaris is in the top 100 brightest stars, I would say. And then you can see the what are called the guard stars. And they're called the guard stars because they're always towards the Great Bear. They're always towards the Big Dipper as the sky. Farhad, Kolhab and Farhab. Almost certainly Arabic names. So you can usually see those 3 stars in the Little Dipper, which is good. Then you can orient yourself to due north. All right. So those are the constellations I'll point out tonight. I'll point out a few more things you can see with binoculars if you happen to have binoculars. So I would say start with the crescent moon, and if it's clear tomorrow night, I can step forward one day, and then another day, and then another day. And so there you can see the sky. So let's see. There's tonight, there's tomorrow night, there's Thursday night, there's Friday night. And actually, this looks nice on Thursday night. If it's clear on Thursday night, it would be neat to go out and look for the first quarter moon, nearly first quarter moon. The planet Mars just a little bit above the moon. The Pleiades star cluster just a little bit to the left of Mars. And then the face of Taurus, the bull, with the bright red star Aldebaran. I should say there's also a star cluster here in Taurus. This is the Hyades star cluster, which is actually closer than the Pleiades, although it's not quite as young. So it doesn't have quite as many really bright, luminous stars. But it is actually closer, so it's spread out a little bit more. Let me see if there are any comments or questions in the chat. Feel free to type a question in the YouTube live chat if anyone has any questions. Another object you might look at with your binoculars is the Orion Nebula. So if you can find the 3 belt stars in Orion, like so, and then look straight down from the middle star, you can see what we call the sword of Orion, right? So if I turn on the classical illustration here, you can see Saif is his knee. I think Saif is actually a word that means sword in Arabic. And so if you had a longer sword, the tip of the sword would kind of be right there hanging from the belt. And then Rigel is his foot right there. And then the belt stars really do make up the belt. Anyway, if you look at the sword of Orion, 3 kind of fuzzy stars and a line. The top star is kind of a triple group of stars, and then the bottom star is kind of is actually like a group of 7 bright stars altogether. And then the middle star is the Great Orion Nebula, which is a beautiful sight, right? So you can actually, if you zoom in enough, I can't quite, let's see, I would have to turn off, I think, I'd have to turn off my images to really show it. But there's a group of 4 stars, 4 very luminous hot stars that are putting out ultraviolet radiation and ionizing the hydrogen gas nearby and making it glow. So this is one of my favorite objects to look at during public observing sessions on Tuesday nights. It looks great even in a medium small telescope. So it looks really good in our 16-inch or our 12-inch telescopes. But even in binoculars, you can clearly see the nebula, the fuzziness around the little cluster of stars in the sword. And what's really going on here is star formation. There's a dense cloud of molecular gas just behind the Orion Nebula, and it's actively making new stars even as we speak. There's a cluster of stars. Actually, I can see where they are, even though they don't really show up very well in Stellarium. Those stars have formed recently in the last million years or so. And those young luminous stars are lighting up and ionizing the gas nearby, essentially making it fluoresce, just like gas in a fluorescent light bulb or in a neon sign. That's actually the reason why there's so many bright stars over in this part of the sky, is that a lot of these stars are young luminous stars that have recently formed from gas in the Milky Way galaxy, and it just so happens the Milky Way galaxy is going right across the sky like so. It's not very bright here in my simulator. If I switch back to the sky chart, you can see there's the Orion constellation and the Orion Nebula. There's a lot of young star clusters and star-forming regions that you can see with binoculars all through the plane of the Milky Way right here. This is actually, when we look in this direction in the Milky Way, we're looking opposite from the center of the Milky Way. So in the summer, when we look towards the constellation of Sagittarius, we're seeing the center of the Milky Way, and you see the bulge of old stars that's at the very center of the Milky Way. When we look opposite the Milky Way, we're looking at the inside of a spiral arm where there's been recent star formation. And so a lot of these luminous stars are evidence of that, in the Hyades cluster and the Pleiades cluster. Actually, you can see the Hyades cluster marked here on the evening sky chart map. Okay, I think that's all I want to say about the constellations that are up tonight. And next Tuesday or the next, if it's clear, I'll set up our 12-inch telescope out on the deck and maybe also an 8-inch telescope. I'm actually looking forward to going out there. The weather being good enough, I can go out on the observing deck and do some work out there and do some fun observing out there. But we'll take a look at the Orion Nebula and the Pleiades cluster and some of the other interesting galactic objects that are up in the winter sky. There are actually a lot of interesting ones. And since I have this CMOS video camera that I've used for some of the public nights that I've done so far to show some fainter objects, to look at some galaxies and things like that, we could potentially look at some of these fainter nebulae. In fact, there's a really interesting object right here in Taurus, near the classical horns of Taurus the Bull, which is the Crab Nebula, which is a supernova remnant. So this is the shell of a star that exploded about 1,000 years ago. Actually, probably exploded millions of years before that, or at least some thousands of years before that. But we saw the light from the star, from the supernova, in the year 1054 AD. We have records from astronomers of the star exploding and becoming bright enough to see during the day for several weeks. So there's the shell of the star, and there's a pulsar, a pulsating neutron star. Well, it's rotating is the reason that it pulsates. It's probably pulsating too, but it's rotating, and that's what generates the pulses of radio waves that we get from the Crab Nebula. So this is a faint object. It's hard to see with your eye looking through an eyepiece, even through a big telescope. But using a camera, using a video camera, we can potentially see that object. So probably we'll try that the next clear night that we get. Another really great object to look at in the winter is the Rosette Nebula. It's a beautiful star-forming region. Yeah, maybe we'll take some pictures of it on the next clear night. All right. Well, let me see if I have any questions yet. No questions yet. Feel free to type any questions you might have in the YouTube live chat, and I'll try to get to them. I think I'm going to talk a little bit about astronomy news for 10-15 minutes or so, and then I'm going to sign off for tonight. So what's going on? Well, I mentioned the Mars lander that's going to land on Mars on Thursday, and I'm very excited about this mission. Perseverance is a rover, which is basically an upgraded version of the Curiosity rover, right? Which has been on Mars since, what, 2014, 2015? I forget exactly now when Curiosity landed. But it has a plutonium-powered power source. It doesn't rely on solar cells to get electricity, so it could last quite a long time on Mars. It's going to be, like Curiosity, looking for evidence of water on Mars, looking for evidence of past life on Mars, even doing more than Curiosity has been doing, to do some specific chemical experiments to look for life, evidence of past life on Mars. I think one really amazing thing about the Perseverance rover is that it's going to have a drone built into it. You can see right here in the front is a little, it's got two propellers on it. What's the name of this one? I think it's Innovation is the name of the drone. And it's going to fly in the Martian atmosphere. Now, Mars has a very thin atmosphere. It's something like 1% the atmospheric pressure of the Earth's atmosphere. So the rotors on this drone have to spin very fast in order to generate enough lift, and it has to be very light in order to be able to get off the ground and fly for any length of time. And if I remember correctly, I think it can fly for like 30, 40 minutes, scoping out where should the rover go next before it comes back and lands at the rover and can recharge its batteries. The amazing thing is that there's no way that some operator at JPL in California could sit there with a joystick, flying the drone around on Mars. It has to use artificial intelligence. We've got smart robots on Mars flying around in the atmosphere of Mars. So I really, really hope that the landing goes well on Thursday. It's going to be another one of those 7 minutes of terror, that NASA hyped up last time when Perseverance landed. Because of the complicated sky crane, there's going to be a platform that hovers and lowers it down onto the surface. Right. But it worked last time, so unless something new goes wrong, it should work this time. And then we wait for the light travel time for the news to get to us and find out that it actually works. I can't wait to see the first images from Perseverance, and I can't wait to see the first aerial photography from the drone, the helicopter associated with Perseverance. Some other interesting news, astronomy news, is happening right now is that we're having a flyby of a fairly large near-Earth asteroid. Now, this asteroid is not huge. It's about 300 meters in diameter, I think is the diameter. Yeah, it's about 300 meters across. It's a rocky asteroid. It's called Apophis. It was discovered in 2004, but this asteroid is kind of famous in astronomy circles, especially people who study near-Earth asteroids, because when it was discovered in 2004, it had a decent chance of colliding with the Earth in 2029. Based on the observations that were made of it flying by. Now, once it was discovered, astronomers could go back and look at archived images and find out where it was in the past, sort of discover it in old data and make a better plot of the trajectory of the asteroid. And we realized, okay, it's not going to collide with the Earth in 2029, but it's going to come very close. So it's going to come within, here we go, diameter of 370 meters, right? So it's going to come very, very close, something like 40,000, 35,000 kilometers from the Earth, about the distance of the geosynchronous satellites, and much closer than the moon, about 10% of the distance to the moon. Now, we know the orbit well enough that it's clearly not going to hit the Earth, but it's going to be deflected by the Earth's gravity, and then there's a small chance that it could collide with the Earth in 2068. So astronomers are trying to get the best observations and the best positions of Apophis. And it just so happens it's flying by right now. Now, it's not getting nearly as close as it will in 2029, but it's close enough that it's bright in a small telescope or a medium-sized telescope. And it's interesting to people who study asteroids to observe it as it flies by and potentially improve our understanding of the orbit. So I'm going to be trying to observe Apophis here from the Leitner Observatory. That's one of the main things that I'm going to be working on when I'm not doing remote observing for my classes or for someone else's classes or for public night or something like that. I'm going to try to look for Apophis. It actually gets closest on March 5th. That's when it's going to be closest. And it's not going to be terribly close. It's going to be, I think, about 9 million miles from the Earth when it flies by on March 5th. So like I said, the sky hasn't been terribly clear here in New Haven for the past 2-3 weeks. I have, however, been able to make some observations of this asteroid using this telescope in New Mexico. So this is a 0.43 meter telescope, very similar to the telescope we have in our main observing dome here at the Leitner Observatory. We have a 16-inch telescope of the same design here. And so if I can see this asteroid with this telescope, I should be able to see it with our telescope here in New Haven. The light pollution is not a big problem because the asteroid is a point of light. So you can subtract the light from the background. And it's possible to see things like stars and asteroids and things like that, planets, bright planets, even with the light pollution that we have here in the city. So I've taken a couple of different observations of the asteroid, and I can actually show you the observations that I made last Saturday. So let me bring those up here. So here I have 2 images taken about 10 minutes apart using that telescope in New Mexico. And what you're seeing here, you're seeing images of stars, right? So you can see all of these stars. There's some noise in the camera. And if I blink between the two images, we should be able to find the asteroid. So let me see if I can find it. I had it earlier. Okay, I see where it is right now. Okay, so do you see this object that's moving between the two images? Let me stop the blink here. So there's a star-like object right there in the image, and if I step ahead one, there it is there. So switch between those two images. That image is a little bit clearer. There's the asteroid right there. And it's elongated because it's moving quite fast. So this is about a 5-minute long exposure, showing the asteroid kind of moving, kind of streaking relative to the stars. But this image is definitely good enough that I can measure the position of the asteroid and therefore determine its orbit and see how close it's going to get to the Earth in 2069. There's also some galaxies in this image, there's a faint galaxy cluster back here. So you can see there's a little fuzzy elliptical galaxy and a couple of other fuzzy spiral galaxies. So if I were to take long enough exposure, I might see some interesting details in those background distant galaxies. So I'm going to keep working on this. This is one of the main research projects I'm working on at the Leitner Observatory these days, is tracking this near-Earth asteroid as it flies by and passes closest approach on March 5th. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop there. Still doesn't look clear outside, but I'm going to stick around the observatory for an hour or two and see if it clears up. And thanks to everyone watching the live stream. Let me know if you have any requests for future evenings, anything you'd like to hear about. I've lined up actually a couple of guest visitors for the live stream, grad students and faculty and other astronomers who I hope will come and talk about their research and talk about astronomy. And I'm hoping to do a couple of demos of telescopes oops, I lost my camera here. Some demos of telescopes and some other interesting tidbits this spring. And who knows, maybe one day when we're all vaccinated or when our case load is down or whatever it takes, we can start getting together outside on the observing deck. Maybe once it warms up in April or May, we can start opening up the outside observatory to the public. I really doubt we're going to open the planetarium before the fall. We're, of course, for classes at Yale, we're closed to the public, we're closed to students. The students are doing mainly classes online, which is just the way things have to be. But that's where things are at the moment. I'll let you know, keep things posted on the Leitner Observatory website and on our Facebook page and so forth. If anyone has any questions or wants to send me a comment or make a request, you can send me an email. My email is michael.faison@yale.edu. So michael.faison@yale.edu. And try and keep things about announcements about events, live streams, public observing, things like that posted on the Leitner Observatory website. So that's Leitner Observatory, Leitner Observatory.yale.edu. You can go to that website. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great week and see you next Tuesday. Bye everyone.